Hello and welcome to my second Christmas video. I'll be posting videos showing my process for creating Christmas gifts for my friends and family up until Christmas Day. The last video was one I painted for my mother, and it's linked down below if you want to check that one out. This one today is for my father. He's usually not around for Christmases because he doesn't live with or near the family, and this year especially is going to make seeing him difficult for obvious reasons. A lot of the times he tells me he doesn't need gifts and that just seeing us at some point during December is fine. I've tried year after year to get him to budge, but he refuses to let us get him gifts. But lucky for me, he sent me a picture he took of some deer in his field a few weeks ago, and I decided I would use that as a reference for this painting that's going to be his present this year. So take that, Dad. I used to paint with acrylic all the time. It was my preferred medium in school and I loved working with it. That being said, it's been a while since I've done a painting, aside from the pumpkin I painted on during Arttober and the corgi painting I made for a friend a few months back. So as a sort of acrylic revival, I decided to pull out, I'd say nicer paints, but if I'm being honest, they're also just cheap acrylics. The folk art paints are craft paints technically, but they're roughly the same price as apple barrel paints and work about the same. But the paints I'm referring to are the ones I have in the palette off to the side that are a set of tubes by the company Phoenix. It's just a small acrylic set I bought at an Ocean State job lot for like $5 or something, maybe 10, but I doubt it. I think they were like $5. And if you don't know what an Ocean State job lot is, it's basically a store that's a cheaper, more rural, kind of run-down version of Walmart. There are a lot of like $1 canvases, sets of paints, craft stuff, as well as other things like food, clothing, outdoor stuff, and some makeup too if you look hard enough. Point is, these paints are pretty much brand new. I haven't opened them, and they have colors that I don't have in the folk art paints, including a whole bunch of greens, which this painting is going to need. But wait, there hasn't been any green on the canvas at all so far, you might say. Why are you painting everything in weird colors, you might ask? Well, that's because I'm experimenting with something called underpainting. It's a technique where you layer down the base of the painting and provide some of the tonal details before going in with, the actual, painting. It was done a lot in Renaissance art, either with a mostly reddish brown or sepia base or a black and white base. I've also seen some people say to include the complementary colors as the underpainting to help the colors on top appear richer, I guess. I wasn't sure how I wanted to really incorporate it, so I went with some complementary colors in some places and different colors in others that I knew might peek through the overpainting. So the trees were all painted red and orange because they would be primarily green, but on top of the orange would be the yellow to help warm up the effect of sunlight that I would paint in later. And the grass underpainting was a mix of purple and red because when you have a nature painting with a lot of greens, you're going to want a variety of tonal differences that have some colors in common. So the red is going to be everywhere that green is, but the kind of red I put down is going to influence the tone of the greens I'll be putting in later. Does this all make sense? Because it barely makes sense to me, so don't worry. That being said, I painted the deer blue because the light shining on them was going to be yellow, but we're seeing them from the front, so they were going to be in shadow, except the complementary is purple. Is that what I should have done? Who knows? One thing you might notice if you know anything about traditional painting is that I go pretty out of order with my layers. Generally, you're supposed to start with the background and work painting layers on top until you get to the foreground. And I would say that this was planned or on purpose, but it wasn't. I just get too excited to work with certain colors and forget to work on other parts when I'm supposed to. It gets me into trouble a few times with this painting, but that's just par for the course, honestly. It's a common theme for me, so welcome to the circus. I also didn't start with the sky in the background because I thought I was going to keep it that blue. Spoilers, I didn't. So I had started with the trees using a whole bunch of greens and yellows and some blues, using a fan brush and dabbing it all over to make it look like leaves. But it was around halfway through doing this that I realized I didn't like the sky, so I painted over it. a lot. Initially with yellow, which was dumb because then it looked green. So I didn't plan this part out, like at all, which is dumb. So I tried to save it with a bunch of white, and then promptly gave up to work on the rest of the trees instead because that made me happy. Honestly, my favorite part of the painting was working on the trees. I love painting with green because there's so much variety in the color family, and you can be pretty loose when painting the shapes. The trees in the reference were all fir trees, and there wasn't any sky at all. So I took creative liberty to change up the shapes and shades and lighting to make it look more interesting. The only tree I had a problem with was the one in the far left. I couldn't get it to look the way I wanted it to, and I tried for like about an hour going back and forth to this dang tree to try and get it to look right. In the end, I changed it to a willow tree, which won't really be obvious until the end, so just ignore it for now. I added some more orange to the side of the trees facing the sunlight to give warmth to the harsh yellow rim lighting, which I think was one of my better ideas, honestly. Then I went back and forth between the bush and the deer behind it because I didn't really want to paint the deer yet, but I knew that I had to get the layer in, so I painted the deer with like a yellow ochre, and then continued on with happily painting the greenery. Once I did get to the deer, I'm going to be honest, this is where I cut out a lot of footage. This piece took about 7 hours, and I've shortened it so much. A lot of it was painting the deer because I kept getting frustrated with the colors and lines and details. So if it seems like there's still a lot of footage of me painting the deer, just think about how long I actually spent on them. Because, oh my god, it was a while. At some point before I got to the last deer, I was called down for dinner, and I had finally caught up to reality to find that so much time had passed, and honestly, that break was necessary. I often forget to take breaks when I'm painting because I get into the flow and don't want to be disrupted, but the break was super helpful when it came to looking at the piece with fresh eyes to see what still needed work and to make a game plan to finish it. Did I follow the game plan? Kinda, but I mean, that's besides the point. Oh yeah, you see that unpainted tree in the background that is still really red? Yeah. Eventually, I painted that a pale blue purple and called it a mountain instead. Then I had to repaint the trees and deer on top of that, which is why I'm telling you all now. Please paint your backgrounds first and work your way forward. Do not skip around like I do. I am a mess. learn from my mistakes so that you are not a mess too. The grass in the foreground was probably my second favorite part to paint because the details were a lot of fun to like stipple in, especially with the fan brush and the yellows and oranges. Towards the end I also stippled in some leftover blues and purples for some extra foliage. And the last deer was done in between the two planes of grass, and honestly I think I did a pretty good job with this one. I did have to switch back to some greens occasionally to clean up the lines, but in the end I'm happy with how it came out. My poor brushes though. When it came to the greens and foliage, the brushes ended up caked with a bunch of colors all mixed together, which was good, you know, sometimes when it came to getting organic looking details. But if brushes had emotions, they would be very mad. They were caked, the poor things. Don't worry, I cleaned them up nicely afterwards. I like to take care of my brushes, so I was okay with putting them through my torture. As the last touch, and the part I was most worried about, I took the fan brush, dipped it in a pale yellow paint, then dipped it in water, and dragged the brush from the sky down to the clearing to create the effect of sunbeams. Since the rest of the painting was dry underneath, I was able to take a square of paper towel and wipe off any parts of the sunbeams that were too strong. And that's it. I'm really proud of this piece. In hindsight, I wish I had taken some brown paint and drawn in some branches between the leaves to make it look a bit more realistic, but at the time I hadn't thought to do so. And since the trees are further in the background, I didn't think it was a big deal that I didn't include them. I signed it in the bottom corners as well as on the back of the canvas, then I sealed it with an acrylic sealant and let it set overnight. I'm hoping I can find a frame that will fit a canvas board inside it, but at the moment I'm not sure where to look. The ones at Walmart were obviously meant for photos, so the spaces between the glass and the frame are too small for something like this. If any of you know where I can find frames that fit, like, specifically canvas boards, I'd love to hear. Anyway, thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, like the video and leave a comment letting me know what you think. I know the second camera angle isn't fantastic yet, but I'm working on ways to make it better. Also consider subscribing if you'd like to see more content from me. I upload every Tuesday and Friday. I hope to see you all again in the next video. Bye bye!